Greetings, class. Today we're going to go over Chapter 9 project. You're going to be using IntelliJ for this to create a project called Data Visualizer. You're going to do this very much the same way that you did the, I believe, Chapter 5 project. So I want to go over this real quick, and then I'm going to open up IntelliJ, and you guys can follow along with me in doing this project. First of all, you need to export your data project. The only thing that I want from your data project is a Java file and a JPEG. And so remember that all I need is a Java file and a JPEG. The deliverables here on the screen say a zip file of the project, but really all I need you to do is zip up the Java file and the JPEG, okay? Just the Java file and the JPEG. Now the JPEG is basically, you're going to take a screenshot of the command line after you run this project, and so I can see that that you've actually done it. All right, let's kind of go through the directions here. So the data visualization, you're going to prompt the user to enter a title for the user data, and you're going to type in, or they're going to type in, the number of novels authored. And then you're going to prompt, you entered the number of novels authored. Okay, so that's the first prompt. The second prompt is going to prompt the user for the headers of the two columns that are going to be used later for output. So the columns, you're going to say enter a column header, and we'll use the scanner class and enter the column name. We'll say author name, and then you'll feed back to the user, you entered author name. Then you're going to again read input using the scanner class, column name 2, header, and ask them to enter something. And so they're going to say number of novels. You entered number of novels. All right. Now the third data point may be a little bit confusing, but basically you're going to prompt then inside of a while loop for a collection of data points. So you're going to iterate across, grab the data, and then you're going to store it in an array list that holds strings and an array list that holds integers. And you're going to do some error checking in here. The type of error checking you're going to look for is if the string has a comma. So you're going to expect them to enter the author name, comma, the number of novels. And you can see right here, here's an example, Jane Austen, comma, 6. And then you're going to spit it back out, the data string Jane Austen, and the data integer is 6. Okay, so you're going to perform this error checking, and this is crucial because if you don't get this right, if you're not checking that the comma exists in the string, you're going to run into some errors later. So this is the error checking you're going to do, and you're going to output if there's any errors, error no comma in string, error too many commas in the input, or error comma not followed by an integer. Okay, and this is an example of making your code robust and something that fails over, makes it usable. You don't want your applications to fail just because input is not right. There are reasons that you do want applications to fail, but this is not one of them. Okay, so you're going to enter the data endpoints like you see here. You got one for Ernest Hemingway. You got different examples of how the errors should output. There's no comma in the string. There's too many commas in the string. Ernest, comma, Hemingway, comma, 9. Comma not followed by an integer. So you can see they've typed in the number 9, but it doesn't have the digit 9. Or the error that will occur if you don't type any at all, and it should also prompt for that. And then if you do it correctly, it's going to output Ernest Hemingway 9. Okay, once you've entered the number of authors, and once you've entered the authors' names and the number of novels that they authored, When you're done, you'll type -1, and that will exit you from the program. A -1 is our sentinel value to get you out of the loop. Okay? All right. After this is done, it's going to print out a histogram as well. And a histogram is basically, it's a fancy name for a chart that kind of demonstrates the number of, it visualizes the data, hence the name of our data visualizer. But a histogram is a chart that basically is taking the number of novels and you're outputting asterisks. Okay, so there it is. It's 25 points. All right. Now at this point, what I want you to do is I want you to open up IntelliJ. And in IntelliJ, I want you to create a new project. And make sure you got your project SDK to 13. Click over here for Java. Ignore everything in here. You shouldn't care about that. Click Next. We will not be clicking this. Do not check that, okay? So click Next again. And then we're going to give the name for our IntelliJ project. So we're going to type in Data Visualizer. Click Finish. And this will basically create the project here. Okay. So keep following me here. I want you to now go up to the data visualizer in the tree. You're going to expand it so that you see what we have here. Then you're going to right click on source. You're going to say new and Java class. And you're going to now create the Java class called data visualizer. Okay, hit enter, and we have our Java class. All right, now you're going to do some imports in here, and so we're going to do this first. We're going to import the array list, so we're going to type import java.util, and IntelliJ makes this nice, as you can see, and then we're going to type array list. We're also going to import the scanner, Java util scanner. Okay, so we have that. IntelliJ has this nice little feature I've talked about before. You can type PSVM and then tab. I love that. Papa Sierra Victor Main, and then hit the tab key. And IntelliJ will populate this for you. If it didn't for some reason, let me know. You'll, of course, you're just going to have to type this out if it didn't. But remember, for all of your Java applications, you have to have a public static void main method with a string array. Args is the parameter. And every executable Java program has to have one of these. All right, so we're going to use our scanner, and we'll just call it scanner equals new scanner. And remember, scanner is using the system .in. And the other thing I want you to do here, I've mentioned this before in previous videos. If you do not use the delimiter setting, you run into some strange behavior later on in the program where you have to call scanner next line. And keep in mind that the scanner is reading across user input as a stream. Okay? And so there's this buffer that has this stream of data, and you have to delimit that data. Sometimes the delimiting of data is using the new line character, as we have here. Sometimes a delimiter is a comma, like we're going to be using in our application. For what we're doing right now, to make life easier for yourself, just go ahead and say use delimiter at the beginning. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and as well put a comment in here is that to notify you guys. If you don't set the delimiter, then you will have to use scanner next line in certain situations. All right. You don't want to have to try to figure out what those certain situations are all the time, so it's just cleaner to use this. Okay, so now we're going to add in our other variables. We're going to need a string. We're going to call this line input. Excuse me. And we're going to initialize the string. And let's add our tabs here. I'm going to arrange my tabs a little bit differently here. There we go. I want you to type in these tabs because this is a good practice for you to get into. So we're going to store line by line input from the user here. All right, so our next variable is going to be a string as well, and this is going to be our table title. Okay, we're going to pre-initialize this with an empty string, and we're just going to say that this is going to hold our table title. All right. Next, we're going to create another string, and we'll call this string column1 title. Oops. There we go. And this is going to hold our column one title. And then we're going to create another one. We're going to call it column2 title. Notice here I'm initializing all my variables, okay? We're going to be doing this all the way down, by the way. So this will hold my column2 title. Please make sure you include your comments. You must include this for your project. Okay, so now we're going to create another one. We're going to call this user category. And this is going to be the user specified column one entry. We're going to have another one, string user quantity. And our user quantity is a string. And this is going to hold our, our user specified column 2 entry. And then, this may seem odd, but we're going to have a user, let me back up because this is not a string. This is going to be an int, and this is going to be user quantity as well, but we're going to call this quantity int to make it different. And we're going to initialize it to 0. And this will hold our user specified column 3 entry. Okay. We have a whole slew of variables here. So the next one's going to be our comma location. You're going to use this in a moment in the code to capture the, when you do an index on the comma, it'll store that index location here in this variable. Okay, so index used to locate comma in string. Give me a second here. My kids are yelling in the background, and let me, you're going to get a kick out of this, I guess, hearing me talk while I do this. Hey, I'm recording a video and the kids are yelling in the other room, and it's hard for me to get up midstream right now. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, I'll be sure to cut that from the video. Okay, so now we got the two ints created. Now we need to create some booleans. And these are going to be flag variables to indicate the next iteration. Now, I spelled that. There we go. Create another Boolean variable. And this one's going to be when our text matches format correctly. We're going to say this is true. We'll initialize it to true. And this flag is going to be used to indicate, it indicates that input matches the formatting criteria. We have another Boolean variable, and this is to say that it is an integer, because we're going to be transforming a variable into a string variable into a number. All right, so again, a flag that indicates if our second input is an integer. Okay, then we need two variables that we're going to use for our loops. We're going to create that. And this is a loop counter. And another one, loop. And this is actually a used for an inner loop counter. Okay, the last two variables we need to create are array list. Now we've already did the import above. We're going to use our generics notation, which is the greater than, less than, greater than symbol, and we're going to specify that the array list is going to hold strings, and we're going to call this data categories. This equals a new array list. And as of Java, I believe it was 7 or Java 8, you no longer have to include the type over here because it's redundant, and a lot of developers complained, and so now in Java you don't have to include that. You can include it in here, and it's totally fine, but you don't have to put that in there. All right, then we're going to create another array list, and this one is going to hold integers. Now, because our array list is an object and it's not a primitive, objects must hold objects. And so integer is a wrapper class for our primitive integer. You cannot do that. Okay, cannot do that. You have to use the wrapper class. All right, so we're creating a variable, and this is going to be called data quantities equals new array list. And notice again, because I've already specified the type that this is going to hold, I don't have to do it over here. Okay, now we're actually getting into a lot of the text that we're going to need to output. All right, so let's think about this. We're going to prompt, just as we did earlier. Let me scoot back over to our text. We're going to prompt what? We're going to prompt enter a title for data. All right, I'm just going to copy this because it's easier than having to type. SOUT tab. It's good to learn all these little key things here. Paste that in. Okay. Hit enter. I'm going to populate my table title. Let's say scanner dot next. Now, next returns a string. Next line returns a string as well. The key here is that next line is using the delimiter, whereas next is depending that you've already set the delimiter. Make sense? So sometimes you run into issues if you use things like next and int. And if you try to use next and then try to use int, you get this error. And it's because you haven't called the delimiter. And so we know that we're going to be using the new line character as our delimiter automatically. So that's why we're setting this up here. And I'm only calling .next. I think Zybooks may ask you to use next line, but I'm trying to give you little gold nuggets here for you to think about. All right, so we got the value from our scanner assigned to our table title. We're going to use system out print line again. And I believe it's supposed to be you entered plus table title. And we'll do system out print line again. We're doing that just to add to make it more readable. It automatically puts another space in between the next system. All right, so now we need to go back and we need to get what the next entry is going to be. Enter column 1 header. All right, so system out print line, enter column 1 header. Oh, look at that, I messed up. By the way, in IntelliJ, if you highlight it and then hit the quote, it does that for you. A little trick. All right, so enter column 1 header, we're going to say column 1 title equals scanner dot next, right? And again, we're going to use this same methodology. We're going to tell them what they output. So I'm going to copy that column title. We're going to say you entered column title 1. All right. Now we need to do system out print line again. And what is our next one? Enter column 2 header. So we're going to copy that, paste it in. Column 2 title equals scanner next. And I'm just going to copy this, save us some time here. Make sure I change the column 1 to column 2. Okay, so we've got the first piece of our input done. At this point, if we were to test it, all we'd be doing is grabbing the input, grabbing the column 2. And this is basically setting what we're going to have down here. This is the title, column 1, column 2, right? Okay, so that's what that's doing. So now we need to work on how we're going to prompt the user for their data points. And because we're going to be prompting multiple times, we're going to wrap that in a while statement. Oh, excuse me, I got something in my eye. Probably wondering why I'm rubbing my face so much. So we're going to wrap that in a while statement. And the best way to wrap this in a while statement is we're going to wrap it until some scenario is met. All right, so we're going to say while, and our scenario is input done. All right. Well, what did we initialize input done to? Input done is false. So if I run this right now, it won't run at all. So I have to make it a double negative. Well, input is not done, which means that it is done. And so now true is what's in here. Don't get caught up in the name of this, okay? In order for a while loop to run, it has to run while whatever's in here is true. Essentially, this is the same as me saying true. While true, run the loop, right? Well, input done is false, and so to negate the false and make it negative, remember I use the bang symbol there, the exclamation. All right. Okay, so we're gonna set our matches format to true, and let's put a little comment up here. Make sure you don't forget your comments. Continue to prompt user for a line of input until user enters -1. Right? So as soon as the user enters -1, that's when we're going to jump out of this. All right. So matches input, matches format is true. Input done is false. Right? Okay. Next, we're going to need to prompt the user for input. And we're going to use our system out print line. And what do we need to do? We need to say, hey, you need to enter data point or -1 to stop input. Okay, so we've done that, and then we have our line input. We're going to say scanner, next. Okay, so that's working good. All right, let's make another comment and say if the string does not, if the line input string does not contain a comma and it is not quit, which is what? That's our -1. Then the string format is incorrect. All right, so this is what we got to catch. All right, so I want you to think about that. How are we going to catch this? Well, if we run into a scenario where it isn't correct, we need to prompt the user to do it again. And the easiest way to catch that is with another while loop. So we're going to say while. Let's think about how we're going to catch this. We need to look at the line input, and we need to see if it contains a comma. So let's use line input, and we're going to say index of, and we're searching for a comma. And if the comma is there, it's going to return a number that's greater. It's going to return the index. If it's not there, it's going to return a -1. So we're going to say if the index of the comma equals -1. Now, in IntelliJ, if you're always curious about this, you can also kind of jump, like control click. On a Mac, I'm using a command click. So you control click on this and it will bring it up and you can read this. Okay, so if the index, the first occurrence specified substring or -1, there is no occurrence. Okay, all right, so if there is no occurrence, then that would work. But okay, well, what about if they've already typed -1? If they don't have a comma and they've typed -1, then we want to exit. All right, so don't get this -1 here confused with our quit scenario. If the input, line input, equals -1, then we need to jump out. So let's say this, and, do a parenthesis again, line input equals, quotes, -1. If that is true, so if it doesn't equal -1 and the input is false, or if the input doesn't have a comma, then we need to address it. All right, so we're going to put our error statement. So system out print line. Let's go look at our error statements. No comma in the string. All right, so I'm going to copy this statement here. No comma in the string. And I'm going to use a new line character. Notice the escaping sequence here. Okay. And then I'm going to say sout tab, and we're going to ask the user to do this again. Okay. And we're going to reassign the scanner input. Now, think about this. Error, no comma in the string. So we're catching the scenario where they don't have a comma because we want the author, comma, the number. So if they don't have that, we're going to say error, no input in the string, enter a data point or -1 to exit. If they enter -1, then that's going to be our exit sequence, and we'll catch that later. All right, if they don't, it's going to run this line of code again, over and over and over again. It's failing over appropriately. Okay, so that while loop will catch that. So then we need now to check for the option to quit, or -1, if they're going to enter -1. So we're going to say if our line input equals -1, we could do that. Now, there's another equals here we could use. That's a equals ignore case, but there is no case difference between a -1. There is no capital -1. There's just -1, right? So equals is fine. Equals is comparing the value. All right, so if the line input equals -1, then we need to say our input is done. Because up here, our input's false. And if our input is not true, then we exit. All right. So we got that. So what else do we need to do here? Well, let's see. We're checking our input. Well, what happens if it's not? So let's say else the comma location. We need to get that information. Say line input, index up, or comma. Now remember, index of is going to tell us the exact location where this comma exists in the string. And every string is technically a character array. All right, so if the comma location is not equal to 0, because that wouldn't make sense, right? If the comma is right at position 0, that just doesn't make sense at all. So we need to catch that logic. So we're going to say if the comma is not at user 0, index 0, the user category is our line input dot substring. So we want the first part up to the comma location. That's going to give us Jane Austen up to the comma. Yeah. Now we need to get the quantity, the number of novels. So we have our variable quantity. We're going to say line input substring from the comma location +1, because we got to go forward 1 character from that comma location, up to the line input dot length. Okay. Now you got to let that sink in for a little bit, okay? line input dot length. All right. The line input dot length is going to give us the total number of characters. So we're going to say, give me the substring from just the other side of the comma up to the length. All right. So we've got that. And now we need to say else. The user category is empty. And the user quantity, let's think about that. The user quantity, what do we want our user quantity to be? All right. Yeah. So let's continue with this line of thought here. Let's say our user quantity is going to be the line input substring, the comma location plus 1, comma, the line input length. Okay. All right. So we got that. Now we need to do something. We need to strip the leading and trailing spaces from the user category. All right, so we'll say while. Let's think about how we're going to do this. Let's set up our while loop. So we want to loop through this thing and get all these. Let's see, our user category length is not equal to 0. And whoops. And our user category character at position position 0 does not, let's see, while our category length is not equal to 0 and our character at position 0 equals what? Let's put this in parentheses to make it more readable. An empty space. All right, so if that's true, then user category, we're going to override it with, whoops, with the user category. And we're going to get the substring of 1 user category to the length minus 1 character. Okay. So let's do this again. Got our while statement. And let's think about how we're going to do this. We want now the character at to be the length. So let's go just copy this piece of code right here. Usually I don't recommend this, but it's a lot of typing, and really all we're changing is just this information here. So we're going to say this is going to be the user quantity. Let me think about that. I'm typing in the wrong thing. I don't want user quantity, I want user category here. User category dot length And let's take some of this out. Our user category dot length -1. This position, because we're asking for the character at, does it equal that character, that space character? And if it does, if it does, we're going to say our user category equals user category, our substring, and we want to go from 0 user category length -1. I need to think about this here. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we're stripping the trailer spaces from our user categories. Now we need to do the same thing for our quantities. Because we're taking a string in and we don't know what the user is going to be typing. They could type comma space and then a number, right? So we need to do this again. So we're going to have to say while, set up your while loop. And we're going to look at the user quantity, get the length, and we're going to say it's not equal to 0. And let's do that again. User quantity, do character at 0, oops, equals parenthesis space. And so then now we're going to overwrite our user quantity with user quantity substring 1 user quantity length. Okay, so that takes care of that side. Now let's get the other side of it. So set up our while loop again. And we have our user quantity. Again, do length. And our length is not equal to 0. I messed something up. I'm going to get all confused with myself if I don't pay attention. There we go. And did I do this all the way up here? I did. It pays to pay attention. Make sure you guys catch that, because, whoops, it causes your logic to not work. You're not comparing the right information. All right, so we got that. We're going to say user quantity again, and we're doing the character at, and this is where the user quantity length. And let me think about this. User quantity length. Right, we want to say -1, and that it equals that. Okay, so now we got this set. So now we just need to override our user quantity, because remember, we're removing the leading and trailing spaces. So user quantity equals user quantity, and we're taking the substring of 0 and user quantity, the length -1, because that's the end of it, and we're returning that substring. All right, so now we've stripped the leading and trailing characters of spaces for the categories and quantities. Y'all bear with me, we're almost done. And now we need to, let's see, we need to check for additional commas. This is our last bit of error checking. All right. We did error checking up here. If they didn't have a comma, we caught them and told them, hey, you need to input information. And then we're stripping out extra characters that don't make sense. And now this is still in our while loop, right? Still in our while loop. And so now we're going to say if the user quantity index of our comma does not equal -1, then that means that after that, remember, the user quantity is a string that's after our initial comma. So if there's any other commas in the user quantity, then we got an issue. All right, so let's write this out. If the user quantity, all right, let's think about that now. Make sure I'm doing this right here. If the user quantity yeah, I think that makes sense. If the user quantity, the index of does not equal -1. All right, think about that again. I've got this original string called line input, and I've broke it into two pieces, user category and user quantity. And now I'm taking the user quantity piece and I'm checking it to see if it has a comma in it. And so I'm saying user quantity index of comma, if it doesn't equal -1, which means that there is a comma in there, right? If there is a comma, then we need to do something. So we're going to set our flag to false because it doesn't match the format, and we need to say system out print line. And what is our error message? Well, too many commas in the input. Too many commas in the input. All right, system out print line. All right, so that gives us that. All right, so now if everything is copacetic, then we should be able to do the next check. All right, so let's say if our matches format is true, now I don't have to say equals true in here because this is evaluating automatically. So this is assuming it's true, right? If matches format is true, then what are we doing? Well, we need to check if the second string is an integer. Yeah. So we've done all this checking now. We've made sure there's not extra commas in the second string, because user quantity, if it has an extra comma in there, then it's going to mess up our input. And so if we get to this point in the code, now we're ready to see if this input is a number. All right, so we're going to use our flag is integer equals true, and we're going to say for I equals 0, I user quantity dot length plus plus I. Now think about what we're doing. We're going to go through each character in this second number, second quantity, and see if it's valid. All right, so if we're going to use the negate, character is digit. We're going to supply user quantity character at I. All right, if that's true, then it won't go into this next statement, is integer equals false. If this is not a number, then we're going to set that to false. Okay, and we're looping through that the entire way. And any time that this is found to be any number, any character in that list is found to be false, well, it's false. Right? Okay, because we never set it back to true. It's important to think about that. All right, so now we're still in our if matches format, and we need to do another check. So we need to say if the is integer is not true, then we're going to say matches format is false, and we need to output a message again. Well, let's think about this. Error, comma, not followed by an integer, right? So Jane Austen, comma, there's some number, but it's not followed. There's no number there. That's what we're saying. And so now we're going to system out print line, give an empty space, and we're done so far with that piece. So now we're still in our original loop up here, way up at the top. Actually, we're still in this if statement. Our loop is that one. Yeah. So we're still in this else right here. Input line does not equal that. We're doing all this logic. So we're in this else still. We're coming all the way down here. And what are we going to type? Well, let's type a comment. We're going to say the output string, both of these pass format checking tests. That's essentially what we've done. And so we're saying if it matches format, well, what are we saying here? We're saying the data string is a category. Let's go over here and look at our so the data string is this and the data integer is 6. That's what we have to output now that we've done all that data validation. So we'll say system out print line data string is user category, which if we typed in Jane Austen, that's what should appear here. So now we need to do the same thing for the data integer. Now keep in mind, what we've done here is all this validation just so we could output back to the user that they got the right information. User quantity. All right, and then we're going to do another system out print line just for empty space. Okay, so we've done that. Now we need to add this validated data to our array so that the next part of our process can begin, right? So we need to add our categories and quantities to the corresponding array list. All right. So we declare our data categories up there. So we say data categories add. And now we're going to add the user category. And data quantities add. And we're going to add our user quantity. But this is the part where we have to parse it, because right now user quantity is still a string. So we're going to use integer parse int, pass in our user quantity. Now keep in mind, at this point we validated that user quantity is a for real number because we've done all of this checking up here. We validated it. So now we're down to here. We've entered the data. We've matched that. That brings us, let's say, this brings us down to this point. Now we need to format our table. Okay. So this is where you get to use the fun system out print format statements. So we're going to say system out print line first. Give us a new line. And then we're going to use system out format. And I'm going to tell it that I want to go 33. Yeah. And then my data is going to be the table title we assigned early on. Okay. And then system out format. And this needs to be, let's say, percent 20s pipe percent 23s, whoops, new line. And then our data, because we got the pipe in here, we're going to do column 1 title, comma, column 2 title. I want to show you something real quick before we go any further. If I actually drill into print format, you'll notice that it takes a object args args, right? This notation basically is a comma delimited list. And if you're curious about that, you can actually read the documentation here. Here's the args. It refers to a format of a string. If there's more arguments than the format specifiers, right, it just uses a comma. So that's how that works. Okay, so we got that. And then we need to system out print line a set of dashes. And I'm not sure how many dashes we should use. So I'm just going to do that many. Okay, so we've done that. We've set up the table headers, right? So now we have to iterate through our data categories and our data quantities and output them into our table. So let's see here. We're going to use a for loop. This is where we created our for loop earlier for. So we say I equals 0. I is less than the data categories dot size. The array list uses the size method, whereas an array uses the length method, length property, right? Okay, and the length method. So let's think about this. So I've got plus plus I, system out print line, and oh, no, not print line, printf. Need to format this again. And we're going to use %20s pipe. This is basically the same as we have right here. So if you want to copy this, you can copy this little piece. Makes it a little easier than typing it again. My mouse is not working. I don't know why. There you go. Okay, so we got that. We say data categories, get I, data quantities, get I. So we're looping through two arrays simultaneously and getting the data that's at that index position, right? All right, so that's going to format our table. Now we need to output the histogram. All right, so I'm going to put a title in here, histogram. All right, so we're going to do system out print line. Let's give ourselves a new space again. Say for I equals 0. I is less than our data categories. Getting into length again. Plus plus I. Say system out format. And use our format notation. This is going to be our data categories, and we're going to get the index of I. All right, this is where we're using our inner loop. So we're saying for j now equals 0. J is less than the data quantities. And we're going to get that here, I, j, say plus plus j. And all we're doing is we're going to print for every, so we get the number of novels, right? This person writes. And at this index notation, it may return 5. And so we're saying for this inner loop, iterate 5 times and print out an asterisk. That's what we're saying. Okay? All right, now let's think about this. Are we done? Well, I think I need to print out a new line character. And then at this point, you don't have to, but a return statement just basically closes the execution point, because we're at all the way back to public static void main. All right, I'm going to click on my terminal here, And do a PWD to see where I'm at. If I do a ls on Windows, ls would be a dir. It would display the directory. So now I'm going to change cd to src, source. Windows, it's the same thing. ls, I'm here, or you can say dir, which in Mac does not, it's not understood. So ls in Mac. Then we're going to type Java C data visualizer. You can use the tab to finish that. Remember, the javac command is to compile. So I'll compile this, and hopefully I don't have any typos. I don't see any little red lines up here, so I think I'm good. All right, so it compiled fine. And then, of course, you can run it by typing Java data visualizer, just the class name. We hit enter. All right, let me go back because I can't remember what we had to, what was our first title? Enter a title for the data. All right, that's what it is asking for. Yeah, it is. And we want to type number of novels authored. Okay, so I'm going to just paste that in. I hit enter. You entered number of novels authored. Awesome. Okay, so now I need to say the author's name. You entered author's name. Yes, I did. And this is going to be the number of novels. You entered number of novels. I certainly did. All right, so now I'm going to type in Jane Austen, comma, 6. All right, so there's my data point, Jane Austen 6, and it's asking me to enter again because it's gone all the way back up to the top of that loop, and it's asking me to do it again. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to create someone. Let's create somebody. Who we're going to create? Oh, Orson Scott Card. He's like my favorite author, and I don't know how many books he's authored, but it's a bunch. So I'm just going to say 15. I don't even think that's how many. All right, enter a data point. I'm going to quit at this point, -1. I do that. There's my table. It's all properly formatted. And here is my histogram. All right, for you guys, we have gone a long way recording here. Again, make sure you go through this, and you need to add all of these authors, add a custom author to the list, somebody, maybe an author you like. When you're done, I want a screen capture of this piece right here. Okay, I want a screen capture of that. So save that as a JPEG, and then get the Java class, which is basically what you see here. Everything I've typed for you. I'm asking you to go along with me, so you should have done this. I want to see that. Take the Java class, only the Java class, the file datavisualizer.java, and the JPEG, zip it up and submit it. Okay? Please do not copy this whole thing and submit it to me, because there's no need for all that. Just the Java file. Okay? Just that datavisualizer.java and a JPEG. All right. Last few items of business here. Yes. You can, if you remember, you can also run this program by coming up here in IntelliJ, click on the second red arrow, and you can say data visualizer, and that will run the program. You can see down here, I don't know if you can read that, it's very small, it says it's building. So it's going to build the program and it'll run it. So we're just waiting for it to finish here. It's taking a long time. Parsing it. Okay. Maybe I need to get a new Mac. All right, so it finished running. There we go. Enter the title. Right. We're at the same spot. I'm going to kill that over there. The other thing you can do is if you have bugs in your code and you can't figure out what's wrong, you can put some breakpoints. So you just click next to this number in this little area, and it creates a red dot and it highlights. That's called a breakpoint. Okay. And with those breakpoints, you can step through your code. So let me demonstrate here. Come back up on the green arrow, right click on it, and go to Debug Data Visualizer. This will start up the debugger. And if you run into any problems and you're trying to figure out what you did wrong, this is how you can do it. Okay. Again, it's trying to build and it's setting up the debugger and everything. So we'll let that go for a few more minutes. And it's almost done. There we go. All right, so the debugger is running. I have not hit the breakpoint yet, okay? Because it's asking me right here for a title for the data. So I'll just put a breakpoint there. And I'm gonna say test. Okay, now I'm on the breakpoint because it's highlighted. The debugger has come up and you can see it's actually reading out. There's the table title because it just assigned it. And I can step through now. I'm stepping through the code. I'm looking at the values, seeing what everything said. Now I hit this point, next, I click on the console, and I'll type in name. Okay, so I'm back to stepping through the code again. Okay, hit the scanner, so I'll type in number, right? And you can use this to step through your code and validate things. So you can hover over, you can see that it's telling you it's false. It's also printing it out here on the side. All of this great information. If you need to kill your debugger, you just click over here, stop data visualizer. Okay. All right, class. Again, just datavisualizer.java, a screenshot of the table and the histogram. And that's all I need. I hope you all are doing great. We're almost done. Cannot believe how quick this class has gone. Praying for you all. If you need to reach out to me, give me a call. I'll talk to you later. God bless.